Caught my fiancé cheating and using Dr. Asterisk G's 3 months before our wedding. How do I move forward with my life? I couldn't believe this was happening, not now, not after everything Mark and I had been through together. We had been dating for 4 wonderful years and engaged for the past 6 months. Our wedding was just around the corner, a mere 3 months away. We had already sent out the invitations to our family and friends, eagerly anticipating the day we would finally become husband and wife. But then it all came crashing down. I had been away on my bachelorette party with my best friends, celebrating my last days as a single woman. It was supposed to be a time of joy and excitement, but little did I know that while I was gone, Mark had been up to something that would shatter my trust in him. The bachelorette party had been a blast. My maid of honor, Sarah, had planned an incredible weekend getaway for us in Las Vegas. We had spent our days lounging by the pool, sipping on cocktails, and our nights dancing in the hottest clubs the city had to offer. It was the perfect escape from the stress of wedding planning, and I couldn't have been happier. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. After a wild and unforgettable weekend, it was time to head back home to reality. I was exhausted but couldn't wait to see Mark and tell him all about my adventures. Little did I know that my world was about to be turned upside down. As I walked through the front door of our apartment, I noticed something was off. Mark wasn't there to greet me like he usually did, and the place was eerily quiet. I called out his name, but there was no response. Feeling uneasy, I made my way to our bedroom, hoping to find him there. That's when I saw it, an email notification on Mark's laptop, which he had left open on the bed. Normally, I wouldn't snoop through his things, but something about the email subject line caught my eye. It read, "Welcome to Tinder." My heart sank. Why would Mark have a Tinder account? We were engaged, for crying out loud. With shaking hands, I clicked on the email, hoping it was some kind of mistake or spam. But as I read through the contents, my worst fears were confirmed. Mark had indeed signed up for the dating app, and the email was a confirmation of his account activation. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. How could he do this to me, to us? We were supposed to be getting married, starting our lives together. And yet, here he was, actively seeking out other women while I was away celebrating our upcoming nuptials. As I sat there staring at the screen in disbelief, I heard the front door open. Mark was home, and I knew I had to confront him about what I had discovered. My mind was racing with a million questions, but one thing was certain. Our relationship would never be the same again. I could hear Mark's footsteps approaching the bedroom. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to compose myself. I didn't want to believe that he had betrayed me, but the evidence was right there in front of me. As he walked into the room, I turned to face him, holding his laptop in my hands. "Welcome to Tinder, huh?" I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "Care to explain this?" Mark's face turned pale as he realized what I had found. He stuttered, trying to find the right words. I can explain. It's not what it looks like." I scoffed. "Really? Because it looks like you signed up for a dating app while I was away on my bachelorette party. How could you do this, Mark? We're supposed to be getting married." He ran his hand through his hair, looking guilty as sin. I know. It was a stupid mistake. I was lonely and bored while you were gone, and I don't know what I was thinking." Tears started to well up in my eyes. "Lonely and bored? That's your excuse for betraying my trust? We're about to make a lifelong commitment to each other, and you thought it was okay to go looking for other women?" Mark stepped closer, trying to reach out to me, but I pulled away. "It's not like that. I didn't actually meet up with anyone. It was just a dumb thing I did on a whim." But as he said those words, I remembered something else I had seen on his laptop. "What about the call log?" I asked, my voice rising. "You've been talking to some girl for the past 2 weeks 6 times. Don't try to lie to me, Mark." He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I did talk to her, but it wasn't anything serious. We just chatted a bit, that's all." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You expect me to believe that? You've been talking to another woman behind my back, and you want me to think it was innocent? How am I supposed to trust you now?" Mark's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but I swear nothing happened between us. It was just a stupid mistake." I shook my head, feeling my heart break into a million pieces. "A mistake that you kept making over and over again. I don't know if I can believe anything you say right now." He reached out to me again, his eyes pleading. "Please don't say that. I love you. I want to marry you. We can work through this." But I couldn't even look at him. The betrayal was too fresh, too painful. I needed time to think, to process what had happened. "I don't know, Mark. I don't know if I can move past this. I need some space." With that, I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, ignoring Mark's pleas for me to stay. As I walked out of our apartment, I felt like my entire world had crumbled around me. The man I loved, the man I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with, had shattered my trust in the worst possible way. As I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind kept replaying the events of the past few hours. The Tinder activation email, the call log with another girl. It was all too much to process. I couldn't believe that Mark, the man I had trusted with my heart, had been capable of such deceit. After what felt like hours, I found myself parked in front of my best friend Sarah's apartment. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of this mess. With a heavy heart, I knocked on her door. Sarah took one look at my tear-stained face and immediately pulled me into a hug. "Oh, honey. What happened?" I collapsed onto her couch, the whole story spilling out of me between sobs. Sarah listened patiently, her face a mixture of shock and concern. When I finished, she handed me a tissue and sat down beside me. "I can't believe Mark would do something like this," she said, shaking her head. "I always thought he was one of the good ones." I sniffled, wiping my eyes. I thought so too. But now, I don't know what to think. He says nothing happened with that girl, but how can I trust him? Sarah placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You have every right to be upset. What he did was wrong, no matter how he tries to justify it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "What are you going to do about the wedding?" I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know. We've already sent out the invitations. Everyone's expecting us to get married in 3 months. But how can I go through with it now?" Sarah looked at me sympathetically. "You don't have to make any decisions right now. Give yourself some time to process everything. And remember, I'm here for you no matter what you decide." I nodded, feeling grateful for her support. But even as she said those words, I knew I couldn't avoid the decision forever. I had to confront Mark to hear his side of the story. The next day, I returned to our apartment, my heart heavy with dread. Mark was waiting for me, his eyes red and puffy from crying. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you." I sat down across from him, my arms crossed. "Tell me everything. No more lies, no more secrets." And so he did. He told me about the loneliness he had felt while I was away, about how he had downloaded Tinder on a whim, just to see what it was like. He admitted to talking to the girl, to partying with her and knowing where to get drugs. As I listened to his confession, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but also a glimmer of understanding. I knew what it was like to feel lonely, to crave connection, but that didn't excuse what he had done. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You broke my trust, Mark. You broke our promise to each other." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. Please don't give up on us." But as I sat there, staring at the man I had once thought I would spend forever with, I realized that our relationship would never be the same. The foundation of trust had been shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. I had a decision to make, and it was going to be the hardest one of my life. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly oscillating between anger and heartbreak. I couldn't shake the image of Mark's betrayal from my mind. The man I had trusted with my heart had been actively seeking out other women, and it felt like a knife twisting in my gut every time I thought about it. I tried to go about my daily life, but everything seemed to remind me of him. The scent of his cologne lingering on our bedsheets, the framed photos of us scattered around the apartment. It was all a painful reminder of what we had lost. As I struggled to make sense of my emotions, I reached out to my closest friends and family for support. I poured my heart out to them, sharing every detail of Mark's betrayal and my own conflicting thoughts. My mother listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. "I know you love him, sweetheart," she said softly. "But you have to ask yourself if you can truly trust him again after this." My best friend Sarah, who had been there for me since the beginning, was more blunt in her advice. "Once a cheater, always a cheater," she said firmly. "You deserve better than someone who would throw away your relationship for a fling." But even as they offered their opinions, I knew that the decision had to be mine alone. I had to look deep within myself and evaluate what I truly wanted for my future. Late one night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through old photos of Mark and me on my phone. We looked so happy, so in love. I could hardly recognize the man in those pictures now. As I stared at our smiling faces, I couldn't help but reflect on our relationship. We had been through so much together, the highs and the lows, the laughter and the tears. I had always thought that our love was unbreakable, that we could weather any storm. But now I realized that our foundation had been built on shaky ground. The trust and communication that were so essential to a healthy relationship had been eroded by Mark's actions. I thought back to the early days of our romance, when everything had seemed so perfect. We had been inseparable, spending every waking moment together. But as time went on, had we grown complacent? Had we stopped putting in the effort to nurture our bond? These questions swirled in my mind as I tried to make sense of it all. I knew that I couldn't make a decision based on emotion alone. I needed to think rationally about what was best for me in the long run. In a moment of desperation, I even considered seeking professional help. Maybe a counselor could provide some clarity and guidance as I navigated this difficult time. But deep down, I knew that the answer had to come from within. I had to be honest with myself about what I wanted and needed in a partner. As I sat there in the dark, staring at the glowing screen of my phone, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either forgive Mark and try to move forward, or I could walk away from the relationship altogether. Neither option seemed easy, but I knew that I couldn't stay stuck in this limbo forever. I had to make a decision, no matter how painful it might be. With a heavy heart, I turned off my phone and closed my eyes, knowing that the coming days would be some of the hardest of my life. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face whatever lay ahead. I had to be. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself consumed by the weight of my impending decision. The wedding was drawing closer, and I knew I couldn't put off the inevitable any longer. I had always dreamed of my wedding day, the white dress, the exchange of vows, the celebration of our love surrounded by family and friends. But now those dreams felt tainted by Mark's betrayal. I couldn't help but think about all the plans we had made, all the excitement we had shared as we prepared for our big day. We had spent countless hours picking out the perfect venue, selecting the menu, and crafting the guest list. The invitations had already been sent out, a tangible reminder of the commitment we had made to each other. I could still picture the joy on my mother's face when she had helped me address the envelopes, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. But now everything had changed. The approaching wedding date felt more like a deadline than a celebration. I knew I had to make a choice, but the weight of that decision felt almost unbearable. On one hand, I still loved Mark deeply. We had built a life together, and the thought of throwing it all away was heartbreaking. I wanted to believe that he truly regretted his actions, that he would never hurt me again. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that had taken root in my heart. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had sought solace in another woman's arms, who had lied to me and broken our sacred trust. I had always believed that forgiveness was a virtue, that love could conquer all obstacles. But now I questioned whether our love was strong enough to overcome this. As the days ticked by, I found myself wavering back and forth, my heart torn between two paths. I sought guidance from everyone I trusted, my parents, my siblings, my closest friends. They all offered their support and advice, but ultimately the choice was mine to make. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and tearful conversations, I came to a decision. I knew in my heart that I couldn't go through with the wedding, not when the foundation of our relationship had been so deeply fractured. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed Mark's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice heavy with anticipation. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't marry you, not after what you've done." There was a long pause, and I could hear Mark's shaky breath on the other end of the line. "I understand," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you like this." Tears streamed down my face as I listened to his apology, but I knew in my heart that it wasn't enough. The trust had been broken, and I couldn't see a way to repair it. "I know you're sorry," I said softly, "but I need to do what's best for me, and right now that means walking away." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but I knew they were true. As much as it hurt, I had to put myself first. I had to prioritize my own happiness and well-being. In the end, I decided to postpone the wedding indefinitely. I couldn't bear the thought of canceling it outright, of admitting to the world that our love had failed. But I also knew that I couldn't move forward with Mark, not when the shadow of his betrayal still loomed over us. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The decision had been made, and though it was painful, I knew it was the right one. I had a long road ahead of me, a road of healing, of self-discovery, of learning to trust again. But I also knew that I was strong enough to walk that path, no matter how difficult it might be. And so, with a heavy heart but a glimmer of hope for the future, I began the process of untangling my life from Mark's. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew that someday I would look back on this moment as a turning point. The moment when I chose myself, when I decided to put my own happiness first. It was a bittersweet ending to a once beautiful love story, but I knew that my story was far from over. I had a whole new chapter ahead of me, and I was ready to start writing it on my own terms. In the weeks following my decision to postpone the wedding, I found myself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. Some days I felt a sense of relief, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Other days I was consumed by grief, mourning the loss of the future I had once envisioned. I couldn't help but second-guess myself at times, wondering if I had made the right choice. What if I had been too hasty in my decision? What if Mark truly was sorry, and we could have worked through this together? But every time those doubts crept in, I forced myself to remember the pain of his betrayal, the shattered trust that lay between us. I knew in my heart that I couldn't build a marriage on such a fragile foundation. As I navigated this new reality, I leaned heavily on my support system. My family and friends rallied around me, offering words of comfort and encouragement. They reminded me of my own strength, my own worth. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine of my daily life. I rediscovered old hobbies and passions that had fallen by the wayside during my relationship with Mark. I even started seeing a therapist, a safe space where I could process my emotions and work through the trauma of the betrayal. It wasn't easy, confronting the pain and anger that I had been carrying with me, but with each session, I felt a little bit lighter, a little bit more like myself again. As the weeks turned into months, I started to see my decision in a new light. I realized that by choosing to walk away from Mark, I had chosen myself. I had prioritized my own well-being, my own happiness. It wasn't a decision I had made lightly, and it certainly wasn't without its own pain and heartbreak. But I knew that in the long run, it was the right choice for me. I started to imagine a new future for myself, one that wasn't tied to Mark or our broken promises. I dreamed of traveling the world, of pursuing my passions, of building a life that was entirely my own. And slowly but surely, that future started to take shape. I booked a solo trip to Europe, something I had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. I signed up for a painting class, rediscovering my love for art that had been pushed aside for so long. I even started dating again, cautiously dipping my toe back into the world of romance. It was a strange feeling, navigating the singles scene after so many years in a committed relationship. But it was also exhilarating, a reminder that there was still so much life ahead of me. Of course, there were still moments of sadness, of grief for what I had lost. I couldn't erase the memories of my time with Mark, the love that we had shared. But I was learning to make peace with that chapter of my life, to accept it as a part of my story without letting it define me. And as I looked to the future, I felt a sense of hope and excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks along the way. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face whatever lay ahead. I had already proven that to myself by making the difficult decision to walk away from a toxic situation. And so, with a newfound sense of purpose and a heart full of hope, I started to write the next chapter of my life. A chapter that was all my own, shaped by my own choices and desires. I knew that I would always carry the scars of Mark's betrayal with me, but I also knew that those scars didn't have to hold me back. They could be a reminder of my own resilience, my own strength. And as I looked ahead to the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that I hadn't felt in a long time. I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Because I knew that no matter what happened, I had myself. And that was enough. As much as I had tried to postpone the inevitable, I knew that I couldn't avoid the reality of the wedding plans forever. The invitations had already been sent out, a tangible reminder of the commitment I had once been so eager to make. I could still picture the excitement on the faces of our family and friends as they had received those invitations, the joy and anticipation that had filled the air. It broke my heart to think of disappointing them, of shattering the illusion of the perfect couple that Mark and I had presented to the world. But I knew that I had to be honest with them, and with myself. I couldn't go through with a wedding that felt like a lie, a performance put on for the sake of appearances. And so, with a heavy heart, I began the painful process of canceling the wedding. I called each of our guests individually, explaining the situation as best I could without delving into the sordid details of Mark's betrayal. Some of them were shocked, disbelieving that the seemingly perfect couple they had known could be facing such a crisis. Others were more understanding, offering words of sympathy and support. But no matter their reaction, each conversation was a painful reminder of the future that I had lost, the dreams that had been shattered by Mark's actions. As the wedding date approached, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and sadness. This was supposed to have been the happiest day of my life, a celebration of our love and commitment to each other. Instead, I found myself facing the prospect of a day filled with painful explanations and pitying looks. I knew that I would have to face the questions and speculation of our loved ones, the whispers and rumors that would inevitably follow. But I also knew that I had to be strong, to hold my head high and face the fallout with grace and dignity. I had made the decision to cancel the wedding, and I had to stand by that choice. In the days leading up to the would-be wedding date, I found myself feeling a mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, a deep sense of loss for the future that I had once imagined. But there was also a strange sense of relief, a feeling of liberation from the weight of a relationship that had become toxic and damaging. I knew that by canceling the wedding, I was choosing myself, my own happiness and well-being. And so, when the day finally arrived, I faced it with a sense of calm and determination. I spent the day with my closest friends and family, surrounded by love and support. We didn't dwell on the wedding that wasn't, or the future that had been lost. Instead, we focused on the present moment, on the love and laughter that filled the room. And as the sun began to set on that would-be wedding day, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that I had made the right decision, no matter how difficult it had been. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, that the pain of Mark's betrayal wouldn't disappear overnight. But I also knew that I had the strength and resilience to face whatever lay ahead. As I looked around at the faces of my loved ones, I felt a sense of gratitude and love that I had never experienced before. I realized that I was surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally, who would stand by me through thick and thin. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to be okay. I had lost the future that I had once imagined, but I had gained something even more valuable, a sense of self, a strength and resilience that I had never known I possessed. And so, as the day drew to a close, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks along the way. But I also knew that I had the love and support of the people who mattered most. And with that knowledge, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, one day at a time, one step at a time. In the aftermath of the canceled wedding, I found myself feeling lost and alone. Despite the love and support of my family and friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow broken, that I had failed in some fundamental way. I knew that I needed help, that I couldn't navigate this new reality on my own. And so, with a sense of trepidation and vulnerability, I began to reach out to the people closest to me. I called my best friend Sarah first, pouring out my heart to her over the phone. She listened patiently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. She reminded me of my own strength, my own worth, and assured me that I had made the right decision. Next, I turned to my family. My parents were devastated by the news of the canceled wedding, but they never once blamed or judged me. Instead, they wrapped me in their love and support, reminding me that I would always have a place in their hearts. My siblings were equally supportive, offering their own unique perspectives and words of wisdom. My older sister, who had gone through a painful divorce herself, reminded me that healing was a process, that it would take time and patience to find my way back to myself. But even with the love and support of my family and friends, I knew that I needed more. I needed someone who could help me make sense of the complex emotions and experiences I was going through. And so, with a sense of nervousness and trepidation, I made the decision to seek professional help. I researched therapists in my area, looking for someone who specialized in relationship issues and trauma. When I finally found the right fit, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I knew that I was taking a step towards healing, towards reclaiming my sense of self. In our first session, I poured out my heart to the therapist, sharing the story of Mark's betrayal and the pain and confusion that had followed. She listened with compassion and empathy, offering insights and guidance that I had never considered before. Over the course of our sessions, I began to gain a new perspective on my relationship with Mark. I started to see the patterns and behaviors that had led to the breakdown of our relationship, the ways in which I had ignored my own needs and desires in the pursuit of the perfect partnership. I also began to work through the trauma of the betrayal itself, the deep sense of hurt and violation that I had experienced. The therapist helped me to understand that my feelings were valid, that I had every right to feel angry and betrayed. But she also helped me to see that holding on to that anger and resentment would only hurt me in the long run. She taught me techniques for managing my emotions, for processing the pain in a healthy and constructive way. As I continued to work with the therapist, I began to feel a sense of progress and growth. I was learning to trust myself again, to listen to my own needs and desires. I also started to build a new support system, one that extended beyond my family and friends. I joined a support group for women who had gone through similar experiences, finding solace and strength in their stories and their resilience. Through it all, I began to see that seeking help and support was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. I was taking an active role in my own healing, in my own journey towards wholeness. And as I continued on that journey, I began to feel a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks along the way. But I also knew that I had the tools and the support to face those challenges head-on. I was learning to trust myself, to listen to my own inner wisdom. And with that knowledge, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the future. I knew that I was on the path towards healing, towards becoming the best version of myself. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I had the strength and the resilience to face it, one day at a time, one step at a time. As I continued on my journey of healing and self-discovery, I found myself reflecting more and more on my relationship with Mark. I knew that in order to truly move forward, I needed to understand what had gone wrong, to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of our partnership. One of the biggest issues that I had to confront was the breakdown of trust and communication in our relationship. I realized that over time, Mark and I had stopped truly listening to each other, had stopped making an effort to understand and support one another's needs and desires. Instead, we had fallen into patterns of avoidance and defensiveness, of hiding our true feelings and fears from each other. We had stopped being honest with ourselves and with each other, and that lack of authenticity had slowly eroded the foundation of our relationship. I also had to acknowledge my own role in this breakdown. I had to admit that I had often prioritized Mark's needs and desires over my own, that I had been willing to compromise my own happiness and well-being for the sake of the relationship. I had to face the uncomfortable truth that I had been complicit in my own unhappiness, that I had allowed myself to be diminished and disempowered in the pursuit of the perfect partnership. As I delved deeper into these realizations, I began to see that the foundation of my relationship with Mark had been flawed from the start. We had built our partnership on a shaky ground of codependency and insecurity, rather than on a solid bedrock of mutual respect and trust. We had been more focused on presenting a perfect image to the world than on truly nurturing and supporting each other's growth and happiness. And in the end, that lack of authenticity and depth had been our undoing. These realizations were painful and uncomfortable, but they were also deeply necessary. I knew that in order to truly heal and move forward, I needed to learn from the mistakes of my past, to take responsibility for my own choices and actions. I also knew that I needed to redefine my own values and priorities, to get clear on what truly mattered to me in a relationship. I needed to learn to trust my own instincts and intuition, to listen to my own inner voice rather than simply going along with what others expected of me. Through this process of introspection and self-reflection, I began to gain a new sense of clarity and purpose. I started to see myself as a whole and worthy person, rather than simply as one half of a partnership. I began to prioritize my own needs and desires, to set healthy boundaries and expectations in my relationships. I learned to communicate more honestly and authentically, to express my thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or rejection. And as I continued on this path of personal growth and self-discovery, I began to see the world in a new light. I realized that the end of my relationship with Mark was not a failure, but an opportunity, a chance to learn and grow, to become the best version of myself. I knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be moments of doubt and uncertainty along the way. But I also knew that I had the strength and the resilience to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I had learned from the mistakes of my past, and I was determined to build a new future, one based on authenticity, self-love, and true partnership. And so, as I looked ahead to the road ahead, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that I was on the right path, that I was becoming the person I was meant to be, and I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I had the tools and the support to face it with courage and grace. I was ready to embrace the unknown, to take risks and face challenges head-on, because I knew that in the end, the greatest adventure of all was the journey of self-discovery, the journey of becoming the best and most authentic version of myself. As I continued on my journey of self-discovery and healing, I knew that I had one final decision to make, the decision of whether to forgive Mark and try to move forward, or to end our relationship once and for all. It was a decision that weighed heavily on my heart and mind. On one hand, I still loved Mark deeply, and the thought of letting go of our shared history and dreams was incredibly painful. I couldn't help but remember all the good times we had shared, all the laughter and love and joy that had filled our relationship. I knew that walking away from that would be one of the hardest things I had ever done. But on the other hand, I also knew that I couldn't ignore the deep wounds that Mark's betrayal had inflicted on my heart and soul. I couldn't simply forget the lies and the deception, the shattered trust and the broken promises. I had to be honest with myself about the reality of our relationship, about the patterns and behaviors that had led us to this point. I had to acknowledge that as much as I loved Mark, our partnership had been built on a foundation of sand, not stone. And so, with a heavy heart and a clear mind, I made the decision to end our relationship, to cancel the wedding and move forward on my own path. It was a decision that brought with it a storm of emotions, grief and sadness, anger and regret, fear and uncertainty. I knew that I was letting go of a dream, of a future that I had once held so dear, but I also knew that I was choosing myself, that I was honoring my own needs and desires and boundaries. I was choosing to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, to build a life that was authentic and fulfilling and true. And so, with a sense of bittersweet resolve, I began the process of untangling my life from Mark's. I canceled the wedding arrangements, I returned the gifts and the well wishes. I said goodbye to the future that we had once planned together. It was a painful and difficult process, but it was also deeply necessary. I knew that in order to truly heal and move forward, I needed to let go of the past, to release the hold that our relationship had had on my heart and mind. And as I did so, I began to feel a new sense of freedom and possibility. I realized that the end of my relationship with Mark was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter that I could write on my own terms. I threw myself into new hobbies and adventures. I traveled to new places and met new people. I pursued my passions and my dreams with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. And through it all, I began to discover a strength and resilience within myself that I had never known before. I realized that I was capable of so much more than I had ever imagined, that I had the power to create a life that was truly my own. As I looked back on my journey, I realized that the decision to end my relationship with Mark had been the catalyst for a profound transformation within myself. It had forced me to confront my own fears and insecurities, to take responsibility for my own happiness and well-being. And while the pain of the betrayal and the loss would always be a part of my story, I knew that it did not define me. I had emerged from the experience stronger and wiser, more in touch with my own values and desires. I had learned to trust myself, to listen to my own inner voice, to honor my own needs and boundaries. And I knew that those lessons would serve me well as I continued on my journey of self-discovery and growth. And so, as I looked ahead to the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that I had never known before. I knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges and obstacles, with moments of doubt and uncertainty. But I also knew that I had the strength and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. I had the tools and the support to create a life that was truly my own, a life filled with love and joy and purpose. And I knew that in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. The gift of becoming the best and most authentic version of myself. The gift of embracing the unknown and the uncomfortable. The gift of living a life that was truly and deeply my own.